All right, everybody, Songs of the Great Lakes followers. Very excited to bring you again for the first for yeah, this will be the first guest interview for 2026, and Mr. Ross Richardson has agreed graciously to come on and talk with us and share some of his experiences and his time. So which none of that I want to waste. So I want to get right to it, Mr. Ross. I thank you very much for coming aboard here with us on our channel.
Thanks for having me, Jake. Anytime I can talk about shipwrecks, I can tell you share a passion that a lot of us, we can instantly tell when somebody's in right down the rabbit hole with us. And, sometimes it's indefinable what brings us to this passion towards Great Lakes history. But you can just tell when somebody has that fire to go after it. And it's really unexplainable sometimes why we have that passion, I think.
I wonder if it's living in the state or even just visiting any of the five Great Lakes, like just uh I mean, I guess for everybody, like you're saying, it could be different. For me, it was Whitefish, the museum up north, and then after that, learning the Fitzgerald story, and then just on and on and on it went. And it's I don't know, it's like a bug. It bit you, and I was like, I couldn't get
Yeah.
enough of it.
The Fitz is a good gateway shipwreck. It gets you started, and then it's just amazing the amount of shipwrecks in the Great Lakes and the stories and the tragedies. And there's lighthouse people, but then there's shipwreck people, and we're kind of intertwined. So I totally understand the passion of lighthouses in history, and shipwrecks goes right with that as well. But we're so blessed to have so many shipwrecks and lighthouses in Michigan, and there's so much still left to be researched, and so many shipwrecks yet to be found. So it's an amazing place to be, an amazing time to be involved in it.
Well, heck, this goes back to what the 1600s. We can go as far back to for this history, even
1578, if am I thinking that right? 1578, I think, was the first shipwreck.
the LaSalle.
And then things LaSalle, yeah, the Griffon, and then things cooled down for a little bit. But in the late 1700s, that's when things started, opening up
Yeah.
slowly. And then, of course, the mid century, mid 1800s. Wow, just yeah, so much vessel traffic. It's unbelievable. It's hard for us to conceive it because when we go to Lake Michigan now, you might see 1,000-footer on the horizon, or very little. Back in the day, you would see 100 sails and smokestacks out, just completely covering the horizon from the shoreline.
Those,
That
those
was just
historical photos that I'll see when I'm doing stuff, I'm like, man, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it like goes on, and I'm like, there's hundreds of them. Like it's crazy.
yeah, yeah, it's incredible. And it's good we're recording this history, because so many of these shipwrecks now are disappearing and fading away. So it's good to be able to record them and use modern tools too. I'm really amazed at the technology we have at our fingertips now to document shipwrecks and share the information we come up with.
Well, awesome. Before we get going, because I'm feeling the fire from you. For people who don't know you, or maybe they do know of you, um, maybe you could give us some introductions as to what you're a part of. Maybe how long you've been doing this for. Like, tell us a bit about yourself for newer people who get to know you.
Sure, I'm a shipwreck hunter. I would say foremost. I've had a little bit of success in finding some good shipwrecks. I'm an author, and I have a passion for Great Lakes history. I got involved in this about almost 30 years ago when I started researching, and probably the same way everybody does, starting reading those books. Went missing, things like this, and right now, a little bit about myself. I live in northern Michigan in a little village called Lake Ann. Actually, we're out in the country away from the village. But we're in striking distance to the Manitou Passage, and that's where I've been focusing my efforts the past few years, is the Manitous. I grew up in Grand Rapids, and that's where I got involved with shipwreck research and shipwreck hunting with the Michigan Shipwreck Research Associates out of Holland. Great bunch of folks, extremely talented. I was lucky to get involved with them and really learn so much from Valerie Van Hees, Craig. Um, Jan Miller was involved in the early Chicora hunting. So that's really how I cut my teeth, is with those folks before moving up north.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, that's one person, Valerie. I haven't personally got to interact with her yet, but I met her same as Rick at the Knickerbocker at the in Holland when they had their, I think it was their 25th anniversary meeting, and she spoke, Rick spoke, Ken was there. There was quite a few people there, so I'm hoping to get more people on and involved, and that's incredible. And to hear you, what, 30 years you said you've been doing this about?
Yeah, since the late '90s.
Okay, okay.
You know, I so when I was a kid, this is my backstory. We had a pool in the backyard in Wyoming. I grew up in Wyoming, not far from where Ron used to live, and I worked at Steelcase for almost 20 years there. And but when I was real, we're talking 3 or 4 years old, 5 years old. We had a swimming pool in the backyard. Now I was always slow on land, but in the water, I was just a natural. I was a great swimmer, very fast, and I had older brothers who would build model ships. Of course, they would sink them out in the pool, and we would go down with masks and look at them. And I think that imprinted on me at a young age because we were always, sinking World War II models and things like that. And in the school library, I went to a small elementary school. They always had books on the Titanic, and I would love reading about the Titanic. Of course, the movie A Night to Remember would be on in the winter. I would watch that, and it really set my imagination on fire. And I did study some missing ocean liners, like the one off South Africa, the SS Waratah. I mean, ocean ships. But it wasn't till the mid '90s when I found out that off the beaches I used to frequent as a kid in Holland, Michigan, and Grand Haven, that there were shipwrecks out there that still haven't been found. And I was like, how can a shipwreck be out in a lake that I'm swimming in? And then I found out there's hundreds that haven't been discovered yet. So that really set off, hey, how do we find these shipwrecks? How are people finding them? How are they not found? How can we find them? And really, a lot of it was luck that I hit it right as technology took off and these shipwrecks started being discovered, with improvements in navigating with GPS and sonar technology finally becoming affordable. So I happened to be in the right spot. Had a niche for researching obscure shipwrecks that weren't on anybody's radar. So I had a lot of knowledge of just shipwrecks that people weren't looking at. People were looking at probably two or three of the major shipwrecks. I went and I just studied them all because I was fascinated by it. So I found a nice little niche to kind of slide in and offer some value to again the MSRA where I started off.
Right, right. Well, then, so how many would you say you, at least you personally, or maybe your team, or maybe you've been a part of that you discovered, and any ones that are like, "Ooh, we found this," that people would kind of know of? What are some of those?
So I when I moved up north, I went solo. And when I mean solo, I mean I did everything by myself, which is a little strange, but I just operated better at my pace, just going out on the boat by myself, a lot of the solo diving and things like that. Um, so I've discovered about a dozen shipwrecks. A lot of them are shallow water and hard to identify because of the condition they're in. I found three deep water wrecks in various states of preservation. Probably the most famous wreck I found was the Westmoreland,
Okay.
which sank in Platte Bay, right near Sleeping Bear Dune, and had a marvelous history of the sinking story, the survivors, allegedly gold and whiskey on board. So that set off, a century of people searching for this vessel. It was one of the most sought after shipwrecks because people wanted that gold and whiskey. And then I happened to come across it in 2010, in great condition, very remote area. That's
Mm.
why it wasn't found. And there were some geological anomalies that kept it hidden. So I was able to find that. That was my, now I had been searching with the MSRA for 10 years, but had never been on the boat while a shipwreck was found because they are hard to find. I mean, we would spend 2 or 3 years and not find a shipwreck. And that's, hunting, searching square mile after square mile. They're really hard to find. So, my first one was I was by myself on the boat and I found it and I couldn't believe it. But it was one I was going after. And then I found the following year some shipwrecks in near Sleeping Bear Point in the national park that were shallow water wrecks that had recently uncovered, and most of those are covered back up now.
Mm.
But those shoreline wrecks cover and uncover all the time. So there was 3 different keels I found in that area, and then I was up north. I was sneaking up north. I didn't tell anybody what I was doing, just like a friend or two of mine. But I was looking for a couple of shipwrecks called the Peshtigo and St. Andrews.
Okay.
Everybody thought those were in Lake Huron. And when I would talk about people, they looked at me like I was nuts. But I was 100% sure they were in Lake Michigan. I had pulled the research, nobody else was researching them. Well, it just so happened that someone I was acquainted with had found a couple targets and he found the wrecks. Bernie Hellstrom from Charlevoix area, Walloon Lake area. Man, I'd spent almost 10 years looking for these shipwrecks. And I mean, driving up to Cross Village, launching at that horrible launch, Bernie found them, and it was like devastating. I was crestfallen. I mean, it was literal heartbreak, emotional heartbreak, but that's what happens sometimes. But that led me up to the area of Skilligalee, which is a little island up between Cross Village and Beaver Island. So I spent a lot of time out there searching, and I did find probably about a dozen hulls off Skilligalee. And the biggest one I think I found, and again, they're very hard to identify, was the 80 patch in a big sidewheel steamer. I found the bow of that. I'm pretty sure it is.
So what is it? Because unless somebody invites me on a boat or to go out there and do this, what are do you just get all, what's the adrenaline when you feel like am I coming up to what I think I am? Because it's a lot different than fishing for fish. Now you're looking for
Yeah.
because is it all adrenaline or is it moments of just like, man, what am I doing out here?
It's long, but I love being out on the boat, have some music going, and it's labor intensive. Now, this is when I was, this is 10, 20 years ago, because I didn't have autopilot. So I had to steer, I had multiple computer screens to look at. But when you find a shipwreck, it makes it worth it. Then you put on the detective hat, do the research, then the diving, the exploration and things. So that aspect of it comes along. But the shipwreck hunting is very, see, here's the secret. Not many people can stand being out on a boat for, 10, 12, 14 hours a day for, do that 20 days in a summer and not find anything. People after a couple days are just like, screw this. This is, I can go dive a wreck, but I'm cut out to do that. So that's been my advantage, I think, and led to my success as a independent shipwreck hunter.
Okay, okay. That's you guys like, and that's where I'm only still doing. I've come off for maybe a year and a half doing this, and you've been out there. Heck, Rick got to see the fits before that was off limits, and what Ken has found. Like, oh, I get to at least live it through you guys and your experiences, and I would be out there with if I could be out there with you. I don't care if we were out there all 10, 12 hours. It's because, like you say, it pays off when you finally get something, it pays off. Now you're like, this is why I'm out here. This is what, this is the passion behind it, I'm sure.
Yeah, yeah, and it can be frustrating, and especially the last few years, I've really gotten beaten up out there. So I need to, adjust the boat and put in some technologies to make it a little easier to operate the boat. I've always operated on a shoestring budget because it's been myself. So I was the autopilot.
I was gonna
But
say, do
if
you
you get out
still do
there,
it yourself now too? Are you still by yourself, or do you have at least one or two people come with you?
I've got a partner now, Jed Jaworski,
Okay.
who we kind of get out there. But these past couple of years, I've been tied up with other stuff and could not get out there. But I'm hoping this year is going to be a little different. But now Jed comes out there, and that helps too. You get older, you want to take a nap, and he can drive and look at the computer monitors. We can take turns, and it's a lot better to have somebody out there. I think in the early years, it was because I'm in a remote area, it was hard to find people to regularly go out.
Mm.
And I didn't have to retrain somebody all the time. And most people, after a time or two, they're like, "Oh, this is for the birds." But we'll get you out there this summer.
Oh, don't dangle a carrot in front of me, Ross, because that's all I need to hear. That's all I need to hear.
Yeah, we'll get you out there. And then we get to tell lies while we're cruising. Everybody's telling stories. It's good times. But we're chasing history. There's history on the bottom of the lakes. There's just on dry land, you're not going to find a building sealed up during the Civil War that's been unseen since the Civil War. Nobody's been, and then boom, there it is. You open the door and the tools are on the workbench. The china's in the cupboard. So there's not anything like that on dry land. But there is in our lakes, especially in Lake Michigan. It's unbelievable the shipwrecks that are out there still
Well,
unfound.
right. It's like a time capsule. Like when that went down in the 1800s, 1900s, like it for the most part. Now that's great for the next question is how much of these wrecks and we will definitely get to the artifacts part because I know that's big for you as well. How much of these wrecks one, it's good that it's freshwater, it's not saltwater, but
Yes.
the invasive species like the zebra mussels, what is that impacting for these preserving these long term?
Well, now the level of decay. So, okay, if you think about it time wise, there was a group of shipwrecks that went down in the 20s and 30s. Well, let's say in 2000 somebody got into shipwreck hunting or shipwreck diving. Well, these shipwrecks are 75 years old. Well, now they're 100 years old, and the older ones are 125, 150 years. They're starting to decay and break down even faster, and the quagga mussels are really adding that. They're accelerating the already decaying process. I mean, things decay over time. The quaggas are clearing up the water, but they're allowing the sunlight down a lot deeper, which is warming the water deeper. Some of these wrecks didn't see the sunlight for a century,
Mhm.
and now all of a sudden it's ambient light down at 300 feet. Well, that's warming that water up, even if it's only 5 degrees warmer down there, or the warmer water from triggers, it's still going to decay these wrecks faster over time. So, and not to mention the phosphate. The phosphate is a waste these quaggas produce are eating away at things as well. So
Does that affect wooden shipwrecks more than steel barges, or is that it just both are same affected you either way?
now my understanding is it affects actually the aircraft mostly. The aluminum is most susceptible to this phosphate. So the World War II planes are really starting to see increased degradation.
Okay.
And then steel and wood, I really don't know. I know steel rusts and wood. The white oak, again, that's on the outside of it. You get all this coating of quaggas on there, and they have their adhesive on there. That's probably, slowly going to eat away at that wood as well.
Yeah. Because then, like, we look at the Bradley that's in Lake Michigan. Like, how are we still going to have the Bradley for a good next 100 years, or is that do you think itself's going to start really seeing some degradation?
The Bradley, yes. I mean, that's a newer wreck, 58, I think. And it's deep, but I think it's completely infested with quaggas. Ken Merriman found the Pure Marquette 18, and that was in 550 feet. And again, that thing was completely infested with quaggas. So they might go down the full 900 feet in Lake Michigan. We don't know. We don't know because Ken's found the deepest shipwreck so far at 550 feet. but we know it was completely infested with that. They seem to like metal more than they do wood, in my opinion.
Mhm.
And I'm not an expert, but it just seems like they adhere to the wood or the metal. I'm sorry. They seem to like the metal more than they do the wood. So
Are they more present in Superior, or is it more Huron, Michigan, Erie that they're, or is because of Superior's temps? Does that affect it as much too, or?
I heard this that the alkalinity is a little bit different in Lake Superior, so they have very few quaggas. And it used to be zebra mussels, but quaggas are now like 99% of the mussels. The zebras are basically gone. They've been pushed out by the little bit slightly larger cousin, the quagga. Hardly any in Lake Superior, so you're still able to see the names on the ships. You're still able to see things in amazing condition, artifacts where when you get into Lake Michigan, I mean, everything gets covered by them. All the artifacts too that are exposed,
Yeah.
maybe that are on the deck or on the side laying next to the ship. So, and Huron's bad. Erie, they're bad. They're bad in all the lower lakes, Ontario. So they're here to stay. There's no way to really get rid of them.
No. Oh, that's
And
so upsetting hearing, because now we might as well bring up artifacts, and I've heard different opinions on that altogether. Like, some people want them to just stay where they are at. But then
yes.
what do we got? What is enough what we have in the museums? Should we take more now, or I guess, explain one, the preservation side of it firstly, like with these artifacts, and then I guess the second part would be, what's your take on it? Should we take some? Should we take none? Should we only document, leave as is? What do you think?
Well, a little bit of history on diving and Great Lakes shipwrecks. So, it used to be a business of salvaging shipwrecks in the late 1800s, and the hard hat divers would go down into the teens, the 20s, into the 30s. Um, with World War II and shortly after World War II came out the scuba that we see now with a tank on the back, a mask. So by the 50s, scuba diving hit the Great Lakes. And that opened it up to your average person to be able to get out there. Well, of course, you have all these shipwrecks, and I'm not going to say they were easier to find back then, but they were plentiful in shallower water. So shipwrecks were being discovered. These scuba divers were going out, and in the 50s and 60s, they started stripping down everything from these shipwrecks. I mean, they would bring home the dead eyes, the portholes, the ship's wheel, cut that out. I mean, they just stripped them right down into a hulk because they were trophies. I would be telling you about a shipwreck, then I would hold up a piece of, look at this piece of china from the shipwreck. But all it left was these stripped down hulks behind. So, and in some shipwreck furniture, some people started making, became a cottage industry making shipwreck furniture, which I got some behind me. I got a pretty good collection of it right now. Well, in 1987, they made it illegal to take anything from a shipwreck, the Abandoned Shipwreck Act, in order to preserve these, because as soon as a shipwreck was found, these divers would come in and swarm and just strip it right down. And they didn't take care of these artifacts. So your typical diver would bring it home. He would show his wife some rusty thing off a shipwreck. She'd say, "Get that crap out of my house." It would end up in their garage. It would sit, it would decay because it wasn't properly conserved. They didn't mark what it was. So when this diver would walk on to, the next realm, they would the family would come in and just, what is this old junk? It came up into the dumpster. So we lost so many artifacts. So the Abandoned Shipwreck Act was good in 1987, but things change, times change, and culture has changed. So the culture of diving has changed. The trophies are no longer a tangible item from a shipwreck, a ship's wheel or a pulley or whatever. It's now a photograph of the shipwreck or video. That's the new trophy. And you've seen some amazing underwater footage from some of these very talented divers. That's been the culture shift, which is good. But now with invasive species, the time marching on as it does for all of us, we're looking at these shipwrecks decaying and we're looking at losing so many artifacts. I'm going to estimate there's 150 unfound shipwrecks in Lake Michigan. Those are deeper shipwrecks that haven't been discovered yet. Each one is going to be loaded with artifacts. Do we just let the sheer volume of them out there, do we just let them all sit down there and all disappear? But there's another side to this. How many people are that interested in shipwreck artifacts? I know the state of Michigan, there was a schooner, the Rockaway off South Haven, and they did a recovery and they recovered all the artifacts from it and put it in the museum for like a year or two. Now it's sitting in a warehouse because there's just not that much interest from the general public in seeing these artifacts right now. So that's something we need to consider.
Sorry to interrupt. That's the same thing Rick was talking about. Like we got the Irwin up north, we got the Meteor, we got the Valley Camp, we got all, and nobody goes to them. Nobody, like you were just saying, nobody checks out these artifacts on display. Nobody has any interest, and it's both a passion and a frustration of mine because we're the Great Lakes state. Like you're saying, time is marching on. This is history, and it's only going to be there for so long. And is it just the smartphone has replaced the interest in actually going out and looking and getting into a hobby, getting into it itself? Or I don't know, because I'm only 34. I'm about to be 35, but I'm 34. And by the time I started getting really into this, I'm like, man, I feel like I wasted so much time when there's this rich lifetimes that have come and gone around us, and nobody cares. Nobody, oh, that's cool. You found such and such a wreck, or to talk to you, you're like, oh, they got some artifacts. Hmm, honey, what's for dinner tonight? Oh, is the game on later? Like, really?
Yeah, yeah.
You know?
It's and when we announce a new shipwreck too, that's an issue because so many shipwrecks have been found and our media consumption is so different. We now consume media, instead of maybe 5 or 10 news stories a day, it's 100 news stories a day. Um, we launched we had a story come out about a shipwreck in Lake Huron with and we legally recovered rye from it to make whiskey through Mammoth Distilling. Great story, fantastic visuals. The way it worked out, the story came out around election time. It got known. Everybody was so wound up about the election. Had it came out this year, it probably would have been a big national story. It was fantastic.
Right.
But, who's to predict that an election would suck all the air out of the room?
What was the one that
And
was just found in Huron? Oh,
Carruthers.
Carruthers, that's right. And that's
Yeah.
upside down that they found it.
Yeah. Yeah. The biggest still missing shipwreck in the Great Lakes. Fantastic Dave Trotter. He's the Henry Ford of shipwreck hunters. He figured out he put a system in place, a process in place, and he's discovered at least 100 shipwrecks, which is incredible numbers. So, yeah, great story. That did get some great press, but that's always a fight. And he really tuned the story to get that press. It just doesn't happen easily. You really got to work hard
Yeah.
to get the media interested. But that's the climate we're in today. And, talking about artifacts. So I can remember going to my grandparents' house and they had a china cabinet and my grandma had all these little tchotchkes and knickknacks and everything. And when I walk in, I have a son about your age. When I walk into his house, there's a couple pieces of IKEA furniture. It's a different culture now. People just aren't into the things. So there's not an interest in things like artifacts. It's maybe more the experience, maybe more the history. So just the way our culture's evolving right now, owning these physical things isn't necessarily in style.
Hmm.
When I was your age, Victorian homes were all the rage. Now it's mid-century modern. Everybody wants a nobody wants the Victorian. Everybody wants a mid-century. Things change. So it's trying to navigate that as we go through history and we're discovering history. We got to figure out where we are now and what to do that. I think, shipwrecks are like barns. I love old barns. Old barns are cool, but not every old barn is historic.
Hmm.
And shipwrecks are cool, but not every old shipwreck is historic.
Yeah.
Not everyone has a great story. Some is an old ship and it sank, and it was like an 18-wheeler that finally broke down, and they just left it there.
Yeah.
Um, so there's all these questions. I'm not saying I have a lot of answers for this. I'm just saying there's some questions, and with as much upheaval and change as there is in the world, we might as well keep going and apply that to shipwrecks and figure out the best path forward before we lose all these treasures. And when I think about things, I think about people 100 years from now. We're researching people from 150 years ago. But 100 years from now, what are we going to leave behind for our ancestors? It would be nice to leave them some artifacts that they can touch, something tangible that our great great grandkids can reach out, touch, and feel.
Well, I'm gonna